Mentally abusing them, physically abusing them, sexually abusing them. Adverse childhood experiences. Now, adverse childhood experiences. Mentally abusing them, physically abusing them, sexually abusing them.
Adverse childhood experiences. We got the unpredictable stresses that children go through, like losing mommy or daddy, or watching them go to jail, forced to grow up because they've been touched down there. They even see parents depressed with no time to spare. This is why the kids are lonely, traumatized. That's why ACEs matter.
So have you heard about these things called ACEs?
I mean, I think I heard of them, something about adverse childhood experiences. Why you ask me that?
Yeah, that is what ACEs stands for. And I was reading this research from the CDC. And like you said, adverse childhood experiences, you basically take these 10 questions and it's going to give you a score, 0 through 10. What was fascinating about this research was they said if you score a 5 or more, they be saying you're a risk to society.
So what you're saying is both me and my sons are a risk to society? They build prisons in preparation for people with these untreated ACEs, don't they?
Yeah, basically. Unless, of course, they go untreated and you catch them early. But that ain't it. You know what else the CDC said?
What?
The CDC said that diabetes, obesity, cancer, heart disease, and stroke are all associated with these things called adverse childhood experiences, aka ACEs.
Stop. So what you're saying is if the streets don't kill me, the diseases resulting from these ACEs will? The diseases resulting from these ACEs will? What about alcoholism? I got a couple of people that's been messed up on alcoholism in my family. A couple of them done died.
That's in there too, but I'm just talking about the top 5. We ain't even got to the tip of the iceberg. Check this out. You know what else they said?
What?
They said 1 in every 6 people have at least a score of 4 or higher.
1 in every 6 people have at least a score of 4 or higher.
So what you're saying is at least one person on this call right now should have been incarcerated or at risk for early death because of these untreated ACEs?
Basically. Well, I needed to unmute my microphone, because if I unmute my microphone, see, this is why I don't do the camera. This is why I don't do the camera. But good evening, and thank y'all so much for joining in. I see we have some people that have already tuned in to watch us. As I was saying while I was on mute, my name is Cindy Stanford, and I'm the founder and president of ACEs Matter. On the third Sunday of every month, we have our reacher, Miss Reba Bell, who is a domestic violence coach, who is going live with us, not only share her expertise with the topic, but to also share her experience and then help other women come out of that situation. We're doing tonight's show a little bit differently because we also have a lived experience survivor tonight here with us that Reba's going to introduce shortly, who has elected to remain anonymous. And I say that because we all know that ACEs have faces, but more than the faces, ACEs have voices. So we want to use this platform to make sure that every voice is heard. So without taking too much of Miss Reba's time, I want to share with you all that one of the questions on the ACE questionnaire asks people who take the test if before your 18th birthday was your mother, stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, kicked, bitten, threatened with a gun or a knife. This is a form of domestic violence, and kids who are exposed to this early in childhood literally experience structural changes in their brain. And so if you answer yes to that question, you can count that as a one yes in that category of domestic violence. And with this being Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we want to continue to not only spread the conversation, but also make people aware of what they can do about it right now. We know from the research that on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. And according to the research, in 1 year, that's 10 million women and men, 10 million women and men, and that one is for the research. We also know, based on the research, that on average, I already said that one, on average, 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year. And then 90% of those children are eyewitness to it. So when families are getting into situations that they are not able to handle civilly, there are more than just them that are being hurt in that situation. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome and thank with all of my heart Miss Reba Bell for using her time and her expertise with this subject. And I'd like to bring her to the table so that she can take on the show and host tonight's ACEs Matter Live. Again, domestic violence is a serious thing, and we hope that you all take something from this conversation. There may be somebody on your timeline that needs to hear this. So if you are tuning in tonight, we ask that you drop your zip code so we know that we are impacting multiple areas in the United States and abroad. And then also share this to your timeline so somebody else may see this and want to take action and do something about it. Again, we are happy that you all have joined. And again, please share. Welcome, Miss Reba.
See ACEs Matter Live, and I love that Cindy said what she said about all the domestic violence abuse and the stats, because it's very true and it's very real. We need to make it more aware, not just once a month, once a year with October month, because we know October also is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, two things that are dear to my heart. But we also need to make it more aware about ACEs. ACEs in itself, meaning a lot of people don't know about ACEs, don't know the ACE score. So this show really is particularly to help you to understand what your ACEs is, if you have an ACE score, and how to get help. We want to reach as many people as we can with this show, guys. So if you know anybody that wants to tune in, please share. Please share on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. That's where we're on. To get the word out on what we're trying to do, because it's not just about the platform, it's about us helping change people's lives through ACEs, adverse childhood trauma, guys. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to introduce my anonymous guest. Of course, she said I'm Reba Bell, as you all guys know, everybody know. I am an author, I'm a coach, and I also have a book called Blessing in Disguise. If you want it, it's on rebabell.com. Also, I am a coach. I coach a 10-week program that I coach you to help you through domestic violence and how to be a survivor and how things I did to overcome for domestic violence. You also can DM me for that. And you also can go on rivervale.com, and there's more things on there for you to see. So without further ado, we're going to get into the show. And I just thank you for joining us. At first, I want to thank our anonymous caller for coming on, anonymous guest for coming on, and just to even tell your story, because a lot of times when we sit in this chair, I know personally it's not easy to tell your story. And I just did a live last week that didn't really record. I mean, there wasn't no sound, but that's technology. Basically talking about how telling your ugly story, whatever it is, can help somebody else. So I just really thank our anonymous caller for coming on, and we'll just flow with it. And guys, welcome her in. So
thank you, Reba.
No problem. So I thank you for just coming on the show. Also, I just want to ask you a few questions. Like I said, we flow with things here. Let me move my camera a little bit because I know that you guys have to see me and see the screen. Sorry. Okay, so we flow with things here. I like to make it a comfortable environment for people that know how I do my lives. So we from the couch. I like to just talk to you like I'm talking to my girlfriend, my homegirl, and said, Cindy, no, that's just how I am. I just like to be vulnerable, but I also like to be comfortable. So we're going to go right in. If you don't mind telling us a little bit about your story and what made you decide to learn about ACEs.
Well, I have all 10 ACEs on the ACE survey. And that came from my mother and my grandparents, my father, growing up. And I was diagnosed with PTSD about 15 years ago. So I started learning about PTSD and trauma a little bit, and then dove into it more when I realized that my child was being affected by childhood trauma as well. And then as it came, then I learned about adverse childhood experiences when it started to go public, that research. And I watched a video called Step Inside the Circle with an organization that works with ACEs in prison and with prison residents. And that's when I really dove in and started learning about ACEs and how they affected me and my family.
Okay. I like that you said about your child. I think we had similar stories and about learning about ACEs and then trying to see how it affected our children. Do you feel comfortable with expounding on the child more, or the childhood about ACEs? Whether your childhood or your child's?
Yeah, I mean, I was severely abused by my mother physically, emotionally, mentally. I was basically forced to be a servant to her while I was growing up from a very, very young age. She beat me so bad that she'd keep me home from school for several days, like after, and my grandfather molested me when I was 6 years old. My father abandoned me, like I told him what was going on. And, looking back on it, I don't think he could have done anything at the time really, but he wasn't around, he didn't help me. And I didn't have family to help me. I saw abuse, in my home. Like I witnessed abuse between my parents before they split up when I was 4. And then with my child, like, I thought I was doing well because I wasn't physically abusing him. And but I realized later that I was mentally and emotionally abusing him. And when he was older, I did physically abuse him. And so it's just, yeah, it's heartbreaking to realize, you know, because I thought if I wasn't putting hands on him, you know, I was doing okay. And just learning more about, you know, what happens in the brain and the body with that type of abuse. It's, you know, it's heartbreaking.
It is. I thank you for your honesty, because I think so many times that we as parents, and I even do it. I talked to Cindy about it. Like, I think I had an episode today, and I thank you for the honesty, because so many times as parents, we just want to do a good job and be like, okay. Sometimes when we go through stuff, like my mother was more of a mental and verbal abuser for me.
Yeah.
And she physically abused my other brothers and sisters, but I didn't get the physical abuse, but I always got the mental and verbal abuse. And so many times that we think as parents, we try not to be like our parents, that we end up, one, being like them, or two, going always the opposite, and that might not be a good thing either, because I can personally say in my own situation, with my son is 13 now, but I had to learn certain things that I was doing and not really paying attention to, that now I talk to him more. And I'm so glad for this platform, and I'm glad that I met Cindy. I talked about this in another show, because we as parents take for granted the child is going through something at the same time we're going through something, and we really don't realize it. And I thank you for your honesty, because most of the time we feel like we're doing a good job. Like, I ain't doing what my mama did. And,
yeah. I also, like, I thought, well, I've been really inconsistent, right? Because I don't know how to discipline any other way than what I was taught as a child. And so, you know, I didn't know how to teach him how to do like life skills and stuff like that, because I was just forced to do it. And, you know, so looking back, it's, you know, like, he didn't get the discipline he needed either, you know. And I think that's another part of it, is like, our kids still need to learn, you know, but we need to be able to learn how to teach them when we grow up like that, you know.
Yeah, because I think we go all the way to the left, like I said. Like, oh, I'm not going to abuse him because I ain't abused. I was abused, but then they need some kind of form of discipline. Do you think that if, let's say, if anything, somebody in your relationship that you had before, or would have told you about this, would have kind of like give you a heads up, or say, because sometimes we're not aware of certain things until we see it on somebody else. I know with me, I'm a yeller like my mom.
Yeah.
I'm still working on that. And I tell people I'm in therapy now, because I'm in therapy for things that I realize about myself that's still a part of me.
Yeah.
And I'm a yeller. So, and I know with my son, he's such a quiet child, but that bothers him. You know, it bothers him a lot. Like, she started yelling, oh God, he gets very on edge and nervous. So those things I'm working on. You know, that's just transparent. I'm working on that, because I can see myself going from 0 to 20. I'm better at it, better than I was years ago, but I still got a lot of work to do. So my question was, do you think it's anybody, if somebody else puts a step in and tell you about it, or tell you about the relationships that you had before, or about when you became aware of ACEs, do you think you would have been adherent to it, or do you be like, I ain't doing that to my child because I know I'm a great parent, you know?
No, I mean, I've been honest with myself and honest with him, and so I think like once I'm aware of it, then I'm working all the time to change it. I'm a yeller too, and I was criticized about everything. So I criticize, I pick out every little mistake and talk about that, and now I realize how harmful that is. And, if I would have known, if somebody would have stepped in and told me about that, I think I would have been working on it sooner.
What age did you kind of like learn about ACEs? What age were you?
I guess like 45. Yeah.
And when you what you said about what happened in your childhood, do you mind telling a little bit more about what happened in your childhood, according to the ACEs with the abuse and the and how it led you to where you at now, meaning yourself?
Yeah. I mean, it was very severe, and it was like from a pre-verbal age, like probably when I was a baby. The first time I know of, I was a year and a half old, and my aunt told me I had bruises from my neck to my ankles from the hairbrush. And it was so severe. Like, and then also my mother would like choke me, suffocate me, like pick me up by my throat after she beat me and tell me not to tell anybody. And it was very severe, and so I have a hard time like concentrating. I have a hard time understanding things when I'm under stress. I couldn't get through school. Like my sister committed suicide when she was 16. And I was 16. She was like 9 months younger. And so like I dropped out of high school and tried to go to college several times and couldn't get through college. Like just like didn't have the social skills to get ahead in a job. And I started running away when I was 12, to get away from my mother. And I lived on the streets for probably at least a year. And so like I've been homeless most of my adult life. Okay. And I've always felt like a lot of shame about that, and just a lot of guilt, and just realizing, through learning about ACEs, well, it worked in a certain way. It worked to get away from the abuse my mother was putting on me. But I just kept doing that. I kept running away like my whole adult life too, I guess because it worked, and now I know like my brain wants to run away. My body wants to run away,
It's called something else. They call it the fight or flight. I know we all heard of that, about that.
Yeah.
Either you get backed in the corner or you run. And it's very true, because trauma, any kind of form of trauma does that to you. And it's like, I'd rather be in the streets than, I've been homeless twice, so I understand. I'd rather be in the streets than deal with. And it was, both times when I was homeless was my choice, not saying it was my choice. One of them wasn't, but it was still at the same time, because I had pride at the time. But I was so unforgiving of my mom. So you have this fight or flight. Like, I just don't want to be around her, so I'd rather not be in her house.
Yeah.
So that's how it was for me. So that's why I say it was a choice. and I understand that for you, because it's like, I'm about to go through this. If I gotta go through this, I'd rather not be here. So I made myself homeless the first time. But I do commend you for that, because also, man, this is deep. This is a deep one for me. I commend you for that, only because sitting here to tell your story and to say this is what I'll say, and this is what I'll ask you. If you were sitting in front of you right now and you was on the other side of this camera, what would you say to you about ACEs, about your history? Because a lot of times we make it seem like it's our fault, and it's not our fault.
Yeah.
What would you say to you?
That it's not my fault, that it's, that they were reactions, it's like, that's what my body and my brain had to do to survive, and to just try to let go of the guilt and the shame, and be able to heal and move forward.
And another thing I wanted to bring up is that, just like, guys, it's kind of like an intermission. I'm talking to the audience. Just like she said about learning, everything that she did, she learned from it. And so as we listening to her story, and as we're listening, most of the stuff she's saying touching home for me. And when you learn something, and something is a learned behavior, or when you are taught something, whether it's good or bad, you end up repeating it. And so when we repeat an action or reaction, say that because fight or flight is a reaction, we end up not understanding what is going on with us. And like she said, mentally, physically. And that's why we're bringing this up as ACEs, because everybody that's watching this show, I really need you to go find out what your ACEs score is. And I just feel like I needed to put that right there, because what she is saying is that if she did not know about ACEs, if she did not know what happened to her and everything that happened to her in her past and her childhood, she probably wouldn't be here right now. Just talking about her sister and the suicide and everything. I just really commend you coming on this show. I really do. I mean, you are a survivor. That's what I call all my clients, regardless of what you are.
Thank you.
You're a survivor. You are, because to tell your story and the impact that it could have on somebody else's life, and to know and have the knowledge, because with knowledge comes wisdom, to say, I know better, so I gotta do better. I just thank you for that. And guys, like I said, please, get your ACEs score. Kind of find out what is going on with you right now, because it's not just that it affects us as children. It affects us as adults. We are children that's carrying stuff into our adulthood. And then we're bleeding on other people with our blood, because we didn't deal with stuff in our childhood. And not saying, like we said, it's not your fault. But once you know what is going on with you, it's your responsibility to go and take that and say, okay, let me find out my ACEs score. Let me go get the help I need. Let me get into therapy, whatever you feel like your help is. Because you can bleed on someone else, your children. Say if you don't have children, your family members, friends, and you just repeat the same cycle. And I just wanted to bullet point that right then and there, because that's what I heard, is that she found out about herself. With everything that she'd been through, she could have been in a worse situation than now. She could not have been on this camera. And with everything that she's been through, she is a mighty, mighty warrior and survivor. And I just thank you. Is there anything else you want to share?
I just want to echo what you said, that it's just so important to find out, about your ACEs. Like, now it's affecting my heart. Like my heart acts like it has a blockage, but there's no blockage, but I have like palpitations and arrhythmia, and the doctor said that I might need a pacemaker. It's like, it can just, like, it's not only how you're affecting other people, it's also like just not knowing about it. Like, you end up in situations that re-traumatize yourself, and then eventually there's like these physical effects, and it's just so important to find out about it and really get trauma responsive care, yeah.
Well, I thank you again. She's still going to be on the show. We're going to take a little quick break. We're going to bring on, after the break, we're going to bring on an expert. She is a friend of mine. We was in the same cohort together. So I really enjoy doing this with her. And she's going to talk about her experience and her domestic violence. After this break, we'll be right back, guys.
Before we leave, y'all have this. I'm a phantom in the background. I'm a phantom in the background. I'm really rooting for, this conversation, because I see there's a lot of people commenting with a lot of questions. So again, your courage tonight for coming on the show is amazing. Can you hear me? You can hear me, right? One last question for you. For people that have not learned about ACEs, because you're saying that people should go take this test or get their score, know their score. What would you say they are missing out on by not learning about adverse childhood experiences?
I would say they're missing out on healing and having healthy relationships and connecting with community and other people. And just, being able to do something positive for themselves and for the world.
Thank you. Thank you again for sharing your story. And Reba, great interview. Amazing interview. I felt that. And anonymous caller, you touched a lot of hearts tonight. We've got several people commenting, just talking about how brave you are. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break.
What would have life been like for you if you could have skipped childhood? If you could help people be better, healthier adults, would you? Truth is, the fact that every person on earth had to experience childhood is enough to care about the ACEs Matter cause. ACEs are so common that 1 in every 6 people have been exposed. Adverse childhood experiences, aka ACEs, are like time capsules of a traumatic past and a looking glass into a blurry future. ACEs are one of the root causes to poor employee performance, mental illness, crime, disease, and even poor quality of life, just to name a few. According to the CDC, 8 out of the 10 leading causes of death in the US correlate with the exposure to 4 or more ACEs. If they can be predicted, they can be prevented. ACEs Matter is on a mission to stop generational cycles of ACEs, and you can help by starting a campaign or making a small tax-deductible donation. You can help 1 million families get the support that they need to treat and heal from childhood adversities that have affected their adulthoods. We want to hire, train, and deploy 250 community influencers by the end of 2025. Our goal is to raise $1.3 million in order to begin with operations for this initiative. Donations would go towards mobile deployment of trained trauma professionals, community outreach, and door-to-door awareness. Get involved, see the results, save a life, and repeat. Visit acesmatter.org to learn more. Let's be real, we need to heal.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me? All right. Hi guys. So we're back. Thank you for continuing with us. This is Saundra, and I'll let Saundra introduce herself. But Saundra was a I say young lady, but she's a young lady that was in my book writing cohort with me, and we kind of had the same kind of background story, and it was like really a blessing working with her in the class, and we had our little breakout group. So I thank you for coming on here today.
Thank you for having me. I remember when we were talking during our class that we said we would do this together.
We did. We said we was gonna
We
do
were coming
this.
up with all of these ideas of things we could do
We
together
did.
to partner to get this message out. And so it is a sincere pleasure.
Yes.
Actually do
See, but thank you, Cindy. Well, just tell us, just tell us a little about your story and
Okay.
what you do, and introduce yourself. And
Okay. I'm Saundra Golden. I am a newly published author of Make It Stop. I am also a nurse, a coach with a 10-week program as well for those who are trying to overcome abuse. I also do workshops for teens to try to educate them on ways to prevent even getting into an abusive situation, the things they need to look out for and watch out for. And I am also a registered nurse.
yes. So tell us about your experience with ACEs and how ACEs is related to your job and what you do actually as your business, how they relate.
ACES is an excellent program because it is getting the word out there about abuse. And not only as adults like we are who have to try to navigate the waters and, heal, but that it
Mhm.
usually starts much younger than that. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people miss out on.
Mhm.
Um, we're starting here with ACEs as early as possible.
Yes.
And I was, listening at some of the things she said about, her abuse started, she says, at about 1.5 years old
Mhm.
with the bruises and everything. And I don't think that people realize that even though she was 1.5, I know a lot of people may say, oh, she doesn't really remember that. Somebody had to tell her that.
They do.
But it affects her health.
Yep.
Early on, I know Cindy was talking about, the risk factors of heart disease and cancer and obesity. And people want to know, well, how does abuse affect those health issues?
Mhm.
Your mind. Your mind is an awesome source. Uh, Everything that the body does formulates in your mind.
Mhm.
Everything you feel, you think, it formulates in the mind. The mind can be dangerous or the mind can be powerful. That's one of the reasons why people who are diagnosed with cancer, they tell you you have to have a positive attitude. You have to
Mhm.
have a positive attitude because if you're depressed, if you're stressed, that puts a strain on the body. And everybody exhibits depression in different ways. Like, for instance, isolation. You've been isolated a lot of times in different types of abusive relationships, or even as a child, because you're told, go to your room, don't come out. So
Yeah.
you're isolated from everybody. So even as you grow, you get to the point where you really don't want to be bothered with anybody. You self isolate. And
Mhm.
when you self isolate, you don't get out. So you don't get that sunlight you need. You may go days without eating, which makes you anorexic and you lose weight. But then you become obsessed with how you look. And now we go into that bulimic phase where we eat, but we're still thinking we're too big and we throw up because
Mhm.
it's everything people say. Because you have some kids who their parents emotionally and verbally abuse them by you're just fat. You always eat and everything.
Yeah.
Sometimes kids can't help it, and sometimes they may be like my son. My son was skinny. He went through a little what I call chunky phase. then it passed. He was back to being what I compared a normal weight, but I never called him fat. I didn't want people to call him fat. It's like, he's not fat.
Right.
You know, he's just a little chunky. He's okay. He'll work it off.
Yeah.
But it's the way you look at it and the way they perceive it. It's the way it's in their minds. And that's one of the things, like, I know, Reba, you have to have a mindset. You have to change that mindset. And it's difficult for children to change their minds when they've got adults telling them this stuff all the time. And when you have these diseases like bulimia or depression, it also stresses your heart.
Yes.
And when you stress your heart, I heard her talk about she feels as though she's got a blockage. Well, yeah, because either it takes you to having like afibrillation, which is a slow heart rate, which is why you would need a pacemaker so that it can regulate that heart, or you get tachycardia where it's constantly, you get V-tach, you have that fast heart rate, which again, you need the pacemaker to sort of help balance out that heart rate. The other things that, other diseases that you have is COPD. A lot of that's a respiratory disease. It's chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. That can also cause problems on your heart because it's dealing with your respiration. So if you can't breathe, that's stressing again the heart. And a lot of that comes from, what do we do to escape? We utilize drugs, alcohol, and again, all that affects the heart. So the heart probably is the number one cause, or is probably in that top 5, because everything you do that causes stress to the body is going to affect that heart. And then those things, other things that you do, like the alcohol, you're going to have kidney disease. You're going to have liver disease because it's affecting those organs within your body. So we don't realize the after effects that we're creating in our children at a young age if we don't get them the help that they need. So abuse can manifest itself, especially long-term abuse, in a multitude of ways. And we're sitting here going, well, nobody in the family had this. No, but you abused this poor child.
Yes. Yeah, that was one of my next questions. How do you think ACEs is related or compared to the health of like the child being overweight and the child overeating? Because a lot of times, like you said, being fat, kids get made fun of being fat, but it could be some mindset stuff and some health stuff that was done to them. And as we get adults, we overweight, we obese, and and the doctors, doctors ask, what's your history and what happened? They don't ask, so what's your ACEs and what happened to you in your childhood?
Right.
No,
And that's the reason why I like this program and the test, because I think that every child should get an ACEs test.
I agree.
Point blank. Because we have to realize, if you don't start it then, let me just give you some statistics. 1 in every 11 girls, just girls. We ain't talking about boys, just girls. So just think if you add the boys in with it. 1 in every 11 girl, by the time they get to high school, will have been abused, whether it's physical, sexual, emotional. And by the time, if we don't correct it, by the time they graduate high school, it's like about 43% of college students. And like I say, you're talking girls. I'm sure that it's going to be more than that, maybe like 1 in 3, 1 in 5, or whatever, if you add boys in.
Yep.
So, I mean, we have to start early. And my thing is, these workshops that we can get for these kids to educate them on things. One of the reasons why, another thing I heard her say is, when her mom would beat her, she would pick her up by the neck, choke her, and tell her not to tell anybody. That's the problem. That was my problem. My thing was, I mean, I was a little older, but it was shame, guilt.
Yeah.
What did I do to cause this?
Yeah.
Why am I experiencing it? And then because of that guilt and that shame, I didn't want anybody to know. And I didn't feel as though I could go tell anybody. And one of the reasons were because my sister had told people that she was being sexually assaulted, and everybody go, "Oh, you're just lying," and they never believed her. So I wasn't gonna tell nobody because I didn't want nobody to think I was lying or what they would think or whatever the case may be. And so, I wind up not having, very good self-esteem, not a lot of confidence in myself, because what other people don't realize, it doesn't matter how much confidence other people have in you. You've got to have it in yourself. And I entered into an abusive relationship as a teenager. But I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I mean, everything started out great, but went downhill real quickly. But I didn't have anybody that I felt that I could confide in. And I think that's the problem with our kids. We've got to get the word out to these parents. There was this thing that I read one day that says, we as parents have our own traumas we're dealing with, but instead of us working on them and trying to better ourselves so we can better our kids, we just pass it on down to them, and they pass it on down to their kids. And a lot of people didn't understand me. Yeah, I got whippings when I was young. I'm sure you guys did too, because I think we're around the same age. But that was the one thing I never wanted to do to my kids, was to hit them. I felt like we could have a conversation. We could talk. I wanted it to be an open platform so that we could discuss things and that they felt free coming to me with anything. Even when I was in nursing school, I dropped out of nursing school a whole year to take psychology courses to help me get over the issues that I was dealing with. What is going on in my mind? And I would have these in-depth conversations with my psychology professors, and they could pick up on things, and it would be like, okay, yeah, you're right about that. So that sort of helped some of my healing, but it also helped me to gain a better insight into what I needed to do for me as well as my children.
Yeah. I thank you for that. Cindy, you came on. You wanted to say anything?
It's getting so good. These hours be going by so fast, y'all.
It does. It does.
I mean, I guess that's why we have to do them as often as we can. But I mean, her story was so powerful. So thank you, Saundra, for sharing your medical expertise. Obviously, as a nurse, you probably get to see a lot of this. And I guess coupled with your own experiences, you're like, you see full circle, like how this is going. I want to do this little thing based on what we heard from our anonymous caller and what you shared, Saundra and Reba. I want to do what we call toss a thought. So you brought up something that made me think about intergenerational trauma, right? All ACEs has done for us is given us a shorter acronym for the word trauma. But I want to hear y'all's opinion on this particular image, and just what are your first thoughts? Can y'all see that on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
A lady shared this. So if we were to unpack how she broke this down, what's y'all's thoughts on this?
I have to look at it. Look.
It just continues. Nobody's breaking that cycle. I mean, you may have a few things that are different, but for the vast majority of them, they still fall into the same category. It's abuse.
And it's trickling down. And I think the big thing about ACEs is what we're learning is if they go unaddressed on a silver platter, here's what you can expect. And the other thing too, for those of us who grew up with siblings, and we all have them, and some of our siblings are able to be successful and some of them not. We all experience trauma differently. And as you said earlier, Saundra, it's all about how that child was made to feel, right? Because it's the structural changes that are happening in the body. And so when I saw this graphic, I was like, it spoke volumes, because the lady who did this, I want to say she has a Pakistan background, but It don't matter what color, what ethnicity you are. This stuff passes down. And to see how our grandparents from way back when were exposed to war and all the Great Depression, all that other kind of stuff, right? Depression stuff wasn't even identified back then. And I want to say the caller earlier said she had PTSD. I heard somebody say that PTSD wasn't even recognized as like a thing until like maybe the 90s or 80s. Like it didn't even.
I think it was like the mid to late 80s.
80s, yeah. And so you think about all of our great grandparents and grandparents who were at war, right? And how genetically that mess with our cells and just get passed down, like just unaddressed. So super powerful. Yeah, we got like 9 minutes left in the show. So it is one thing that I want to talk about. Have y'all heard of that that YouTube channel called Soft White Underbelly?
Yeah.
I looked at it, yeah.
Yeah, so powerful. So actually the anonymous caller today was the one who told me about the channel. So I want to give props to the guy whose name is Mark Leda. It looks like it's spelled Laita, but it's Leda. And he interviews all of these people on Skid Row in California. And all of these people are either sex workers, crack addicts, drug abusers, pimps, prostitutes. So I want us to end the show by looking at this video. And I want to put this disclaimer out there again for those of y'all that are still watching with us. We're not giving medical advice. We highly encourage you to seek professional help, not your homegirl Keisha. Like seek some professional help if something triggers you in this. We can make light of the situation, but the video that we're about to watch could be very triggering. So if you are in a place where this may be a little tough, I asked you to mute your microphone and maybe even tune out and come back. But this is a hard video to watch. But I bring this on because the show that is called Soft White Underbelly, they interview all of these adults. Some of them are just barely into adulthood. There are 882 uploads on this YouTube channel. This man has 2.3 million people have subscribed since he started doing this a few years ago, okay? I have not seen a story yet where somebody's issue wasn't tied to their top childhood, like somebody being abused or getting into prostitution or sex work and all that. Every single interview that I've seen him do all goes back to what happened in their childhood. So let's watch this lady's story and then let's come back and talk about it. And then anonymous caller, if you'd like to come back on the screen and add your opinion on this, feel free to just wave at me back there and I'll let you back in. I'm going to play this video for the audience and then we're going to come right back. And here we go.
So the molestation started when I was 5 years old. Molestation started when I was 5 years old by other relatives. My mom died of a heart attack in front of me. When he sent me away after my mom died, that's when I ended up getting pregnant, not knowing it. That's the time where I got molested. I would run away from home sometimes. But during the time that my mom died and my brother needed a little bit of help with me, he sent me, to a relative's house, not to mention any names, where I was molested. Yeah, but I had previous molestation before then too, when I would go on vacations, when my mom would send me on vacations. The child was placed for adoption. It just became some type of pattern, for me. Then I just started having kids, like every year, every 2 years. I have a total of 9. I actually put all of them up for adoption except for 3. Yeah. I really had like childhood time. When I learned when I was first molested at the age of 5. So that's where I actually stayed. The little child stayed there. I continued to develop, as far as physically, but emotionally I was still 5 years old. Because that's when my trauma had started. When I learned more about the addiction, I learned more about my trauma and things that I didn't know that I was even in denial of, because being molested at a young age, love becomes a different thing. Love is not the same. So you try to seek love in everybody else when love starts with you first.
What y'all think?
It made me think about my daughter. My daughter's only 4, and it made me think about, because she was molested at 5, like what certain things that parents, we can't control, we can't help, but what can we control and what can we help? Kind of being more aware of our kids and our surroundings, even with, because we know, I know, you know, and Saundra too, a lot of the times our parents was molested. Our parents. We hear that so much. And for their age, that molestation and things that happened with them, it was so prevalent back then. And having many kids, and you know, because I also I think, in my opinion, when I was thinking about the molestation, how molestation started back in our parents' generation age, with the parents and the daddies marrying at 14 and 15, and they was allowed to marry at 14 and 15. And that would be so abnormal to us now, but just imagine. And so that stuff was passed on, that what was so normal is abnormal now, and it's becoming aware that it's a trauma and it's wrong, and it's, you know, it's pedophiles. And then hearing her story of what everything, giving her kids up for adoption, and it may not been the best decision for us as viewing it, but we don't know what her situation was, and we don't know, maybe that was the best decision she could make, that the 3 that she didn't give up, and the other ones that she did give up, you know, I couldn't imagine, but it's a hard decision. And maybe because mentally it was something that she couldn't deal with at that time, you know. And like I said, a lot of things, like you brought up with the pamphlet you just brought up before that, is generational curses that we just not being aware of, and we're not calling them what they are. They are generational curses. You know, ACEs, if you don't know your ACEs and you don't get the help, it's a generational curse, because you're passing it down to your kids. And so, by us being aware and trying to make this, you know, a bigger thing than what people really don't, oh, they just mad. Oh, they just got bipolar.
I think a lot of times it's got to also deal with denial.
Yeah.
We don't want to acknowledge it. And I know that for me, a lot of people, like I say, I raised my kids totally different. My experience made me, getting on the other side made me a different person. So I didn't have a problem once I felt my children was at an appropriate age to tell them certain things about my past. I felt if I could talk to them about my past, then they could understand why mama said, no, you couldn't do this, or why mama said that, because I said so. That just, it don't work. Sometimes, especially my oldest daughter, who was very smart, excelled. I mean, this was a child who never wanted to play with dolls. She just always wanted those little handheld computers that they used to do back in the day, you know, before we got as luxurious with them as we are now. And, you know, my thing was, I need to be able to educate you in a way that you don't have the same pitfalls. So for me, you know, I had to acknowledge what happened, take ownership of it, and just let her know. But you still have a lot of people, they take I think they take a personal ownership of it, but they don't take it so that they can help somebody else. And that's another reason why it continues and continues and continues. Because I don't understand why mama's telling me I can't do that or can do that, or even your dad for that matter of fact, but you go out and do it because you didn't know. So, ACEs, like I say, I think every child should take that test. I don't know how we can get it in every school or get every school to do workshops
Is
for
it
these
in the
kids,
health
but
field,
they
like
really
in
need
the
to.
healthcare field, like I was asking earlier? Yeah, the doctors ask you about your history, but they don't ask you about your ACEs.
They don't ask you
No.
about your ACEs. I went to the doctor over the summer, and my doctor's been in the industry for about 20 years, I want to say she said. And she didn't know about ACEs, had never heard of them, and she was in a marginalized community, which obviously, like, that's prime, indication that you should know about this. But again, she didn't. And then, y'all, the paperwork looked exactly like it looked when I was 18. I'm like, y'all still asking the same questions. How many babies do you have that's living? Have you ever had any STDs? I'm like, y'all need to update y'all's paperwork.
But do you ask me, have I ever been hit?
Yeah, none of that comes up. And,
have I ever been yelled at?
Yes. I was having heart issues over the summer. So similar to the anonymous caller, the doctors couldn't tell me nothing. Oh, stop stressing. So knowing what I know about ACEs, I'm like, you know what? I'll just figure this out on my own. But all that to say, y'all, tonight has been a blessing. And I don't want our show just to be about, us being Debbie Downers, because this is a hard conversation to have, right? Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing that for those of y'all that are still listening, or for those of y'all that catch the replay, ACEs are not the end all to your story. Our brains and our creator, our most high, created our bodies to be able to bounce back from stuff. And so if parents are this is going to be my pitch, and I would love to know what advice would you guys give people that watch after this. But the two things that I would tell parents to do if you're hearing this is there's these things called protective factors. So I know that if parents aren't able to be mentally healthy enough to give their children what they need, find your child a trustworthy adult that can. Protective factors like making sure that the kids are involved in some extracurriculars will help offset some of these negative things that may be out of your control right now. Putting your kids around mentally healthy adults is like the number one thing you can do. And then the second thing that comes out of this is that our creator created our brains to be what they call in the neuro field plasticity, right? It is going to take some work to undo some of these things if kids have already gone through that, but you have to start there. And then the third one, Reba, you said when you found out about this, one of the first things that you wanted to do was make sure your baby got into therapy. And if you can afford therapy, if you do have access to that, it's never too late. It is never too late. It is only too late if you give up and just say, forget it, right? Things happen. We don't know what we don't know, but it doesn't mean that we just have to throw in the towel just because, our childhoods did not mimic, healthier versions of who we could have become. So that's my spiel. I'm passing the mic. What advice would you guys give to people who are listening or may watch the replay?
Saundra, you can go.
I guess I would piggyback off what you said. Make sure that you get your child some help. Talk to them. Yep. Listen at them. Don't just hear them. Listen at them. There is a difference between hearing and listening. And sometimes you have to listen at what they don't say and that body language. So be attentive to them. Ask questions. And if you get that hemming and hawing, trust your gut. Trust your gut, because usually your gut does not lead you wrong. And the other thing for me is, if you're going to give your child an age, I guess, to date, because 16 seems to be that magic age for some reason, make sure you're giving them the tools that they need for healthy relationships.
Hold on. Tools. What if that parent ain't got no tool? We're gonna have to bring that back to part 3. Some of them, I do not want my daughter taking some of the advice that I got, because
well, that goes back to taking them somewhere that they can get that information.
Advice, right? Don't be just passing that.
Don't just pass down, because what you got may not work. So you need to get somebody who's been through it, who knows the tools to help educate them in the right way. But you said something there now, Cindy.
Amen. Look, I think we need to start asking, when our kids date, let me see your ACE score before I let my daughter go out on a date with you. I need to know your ACE score. We need to know what we getting into. Let me see your last MRI exam. But go ahead, Reba. What advice you got?
Ditto to all that. But I also would say, the advice I would give is just to be adherent to signs that you don't see. Like Saundra said, and I think I was telling Cindy this earlier during the week. One of my son's friends, she's only 13, came to me and told me some personal information about herself. And she said she's telling me because she felt so comfortable. It was just something about my spirit. That's what she said. And she just started pouring out her heart to the point of fact, the stuff she told me, I had to say, you have to tell your mom, because I asked her, did she tell her mom? And she said no. But I had to tell her, she had to tell her mom. I wouldn't want my son telling me the stuff she was telling me and finding out from somebody else, you know. And I knew, because of what I'm learning now. When I first met the young lady, it was something deep going on. But when she really opened up, it was just like, these kids go through stuff too. Let's stop just thinking, this is what I tell my husband and I tell anybody else, and they go through stuff just like we do. Let's stop thinking because they're teenagers and they're preteens and they're little kids that they're not going through stuff, because they are human beings. They have feelings, they have emotions, and let's be aware and adherent to our children when they're not telling us stuff, not just the stuff they're telling us, but ask the questions. I love the relationship, honestly, that me and my son has now, because I ask a lot of questions, and like I do what Saundra do. I tell my history about what I went through. And I actually listen to him. I let him talk. And it may take a while, but he gets it out. He actually, you know, will talk about it. What's wrong with you? It was just real quick. I know we got to get off the show. But yesterday or the day before, I picked him up from school and I said, he got in the car and I said, what's wrong with you? So, you know, I used to ask high school and he used to have, you know, kids, good, you know, whatever. But then it's just, I felt the spirit. I don't know if people believe in that, but I do. And I felt something. And I said, what is wrong? I feel something. And I said, it ain't even your, and he had a straight face and everything. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, no, I feel something. I feel the spirit. I feel kind of an angry spirit. And he said that and poured out his heart to me, stuff that I didn't even know. And it was just basically him telling me, I just want to relax this weekend. I feel like I'll be overstressed. Listen to these kids.
Exactly.
I be feeling like I'm overstressed because once I get home, he told the therapist, we are so programmed to, I got to do my homework. I got to do my chores. That was mommy. You know what I'm saying? This is my transparent moment. That was mommy.
Yeah.
He like, I feel like we got so much to do every weekend. Now, what kid says that? You know what I'm saying? But he know his mom. And so it's like, he said, I just want to go home and read a book. Literally, that's what he said. And I said, well, we're going home and read a book. And literally watched the movie together. And he went in his room and read a book. And then he had to practice some music for school or whatever. But that's what I'm saying. Listen to your kids. Right. Be aware. Right. Because just in that, I was like, oh, okay. They got to do me.
Exactly. Gotta listen at them.
You ungrateful. And other kids would like to do stuff every weekend. He was just like, I think we need a break.
Exactly. You got to listen at them.
All right, y'all.
That's what I would say.
Virtual hugs. We changing some lives tonight. So virtual hugs, our anonymous caller, and let's continue to raise each other up. It takes one conversation, right? And this is a platform for us to reshare our stories. And Reba, you're doing an amazing job, honey. You out from that couch, honey. From that couch, you just sit on that. It takes one conversation. Miss Reba's gonna be back the third Sundays of every month, November and December. We got 2 more shows with you, so you killing it. And I pray that both of you guys and the work that you're doing to touch women's lives around this domestic violence, because we know love is a strong spirit. Now we know that love is a strong spirit. So, any last words, Miss Host, before I close us out tonight?
No, I just want to thank Saundra, and I want to thank you for this platform. I just thank you for this show, and just making it more aware. Because, like I said, you're teaching me things, and I'm glad that we have the viewers that we have to teach people. And thank you, Saundra. It was great. I mean, we spoke this into existence, and we'll be doing this again.
No, y'all can check that off. So both of y'all have books. I want to real quick show the audience. If you want to buy Miss Saundra's book, you can go to her website, SaundraGolden.com, and she's also on Instagram at Saundra Golden. Right there, the handles. And then also Miss Reba also has a book as well. We encourage you to visit her profile, go to her link, and you guys can get some books. I will tell you, reading is leading. Reading is leading. Sit down, read a book, and it'll pause your brain for a little bit. So I highly encourage you to pick up these ladies' books, because it is definitely something that is going to help us be more bold when we have these conversations. Deuces, lady. I appreciate you guys. Much love, much love. And until next time, you guys, let's rock it out. Bye, y'all.
If you have a birthday coming up, or maybe you'd just like to do something for the greater good, please consider starting a personal fundraiser on Facebook and selecting ACEs Matter as your cause. Need a reason? Well, we have 3 just for you. ACEs Matter helps families in need cover the cost of mental health services. ACEs Matter hires local contractors and even stay-at-home parents who need flexible work schedules. We care about humanity, and ACEs Matter provides free training and education to those who've been affected by childhood trauma. It's easy to set up a donation campaign from your Facebook account. From your phone or internet browser, type or search www.facebook.com/fundraisers. Select nonprofit, search for ACEs Matter, type in how much money you'd like to raise, choose an end date, give your fundraiser a catchy title, edit the default description if you'd like, then click Create. Congratulations. Now you can invite your friends, share on your timeline, and raise money for a great cause. For every ACE story told, an ACE can be prevented. 2 heartbeats from our house to yours.
ACEs Matter is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. EIN 85-1246674.